So we wanted to talk about a little bit the upcoming Yom Tiv, and it's important to understand the Rambam ends off Hilchos Chanukah by saying that mitzvahs ner Chanukah is a mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od, which is a nusach that the Rambam doesn't write really anywhere else, which teaches us that there's something very unique about the mitzvah of ner Chanukah, and it's important for us to understand what the objective of the mitzvah is and be able to do it properly. There's a vart from the Chidush Harim that he says, the Gemara in Shabbos says, Psilis ushmonim, that are pasul for Neiris Shabbos are kosher for Chanukah. So Pashup Shad, it's a halacha din. Since on Neiris Shabbos you're allowed to have anah, so we're afraid you're going to be mated an air, and therefore you're not allowed to use certain neiris and certain psilas, certain shemen and certain psilas. Now Chanukah, there's no, you're not allowed to be mishtamish with an air, so there's no chashash. It's Pashup Shad in the Gemara. The Chidush Harim says that even a individual who, so to speak, a neiris, a shemen, upsilas, that is not royal in Erev Shabbos, he's a nidder gamensh, he's a lowly person, he's ksherim l'neiris Chanukah. That's how he teaches it, the Chidush Harim. That means there's something here that every individual can take, and the shaila is what it is. What's the nekuda of ner Chanukah? What's the nekuda of the mitzvah? What exactly is the point? And it's important to understand. You see Chazal, L'mashal Rambam, when he starts off Hilchos Chanukah, we'll see in a second, he says over the story. The Gemara also says over the story. The story is Bavas Tamaisa. What's the point in the Rambam saying the story and the Gemara saying the story? So Pashup Shat, the reason why the Rambam says the story and the Gemara says the story is because there's no way for us to know the story. It's not brought down, it's not a pasuk. Megillah, the story is written. Pesach, the story is written. Chanukah, the story is not written anywhere. So, it's written in the history books, in Megillah's Tainus maybe, but it's not written anywhere in Ksuvim and Nevi'im. So therefore, the Rambam has to speak out the story, and the Gemara has to speak out the story. But could be it's more than that a person should know the story, and honestly, we're going to go through it, we're going to see that most people don't even know the story, and most people don't even understand the basic reason why a person lights Neiris Chanukah. What's the objective? What are we doing here? And it's a shad for a person not to understand what he's doing. I was sitting by supper today, my little son was saying that it's a person that does, he was saying over from his Rebbe, that a person that doesn't understand the purpose of the Neiris, he said a mashal about a kid that his mother said, don't get off the bus. By this stop, get off the bus by that stop. And she gave him a piece of paper he couldn't read. So she made an X, and you look at the X, and you remember which stop to get off. So he takes the X, and he's looking at the X, the whole bus ride, and he gets off at the stop he's not supposed to get off. And make a long story short, they make it very exciting. The point is that he told his mother, I was looking at the X. She said, Shkoyach, that wasn't the point. The point is you should know which stop to get off. So I told him, he said it so beautifully, you could come tonight and say it over for Ilam, this beautiful Maisa. But all jokes aside, it's a shad for a person not to be able to fulfill the mitzvah and understand what he's doing. So let's get a little bit of a clarity on what's going on from a halachic perspective and from a Agadah perspective. The Rambam begins and he says over the story, he says, the Malchus Yavan were Geizer Gzeris al Yisrael, Ubitlu Dasam, they were Mevatel, the Das of Klal Yisrael, didn't allow them to be Isaac entire mitzvahs. And he also adds that they were Pashtu Yadam b'mamoinam uvivnei Sam, which is strange why the Rambam throws this in. The Rambam says that their mammon, they also impacted the mammon of Klal Yisrael. Very strange nusach. Why is that so important, so fundamental, that they had an influence on the mammon of Klal Yisrael? The daughters obviously is important. We had in the beginning of Maseches Ksubis, and they went into the Heichal, partzu by pratzis, like we say in the nusach, and partzu chaymes migdalai. The Rambam says v'timu atayers, and there was a tremendous lachatz from the Yevanim, and their Rebbeinu Shalom had Rachmanis, and he saved them, and the Malchei, the Bnei Chashmonai, the Kohanim Gedolim, were Goiver, and they killed them, and they saved Klal Yisrael. And he ends off with a little bit of history, that they appointed a Melech from the Kohanim, and the Malchus came back to Klal Yisrael for more than 200 years until the Churban Abayis, second Churban Abayis. Now really, that part is also very strange, because there's nothing to do with Chanukah, and really, if you know your history, that part was not really such a great part in Klal Yisrael. It was not the high point of Klal Yisrael. When the Malchei Beis Chashmonai took over, it was not the greatest situation. The Tzdukim were in charge. The terrible Yanai, terrible, all the Rishon that we discussed in the Gemara were in those years. And for some reason, the Rambam feels it's very important to understand how fundamental it was what they did, and they brought the Malchus back to Klal Yisrael. Even though Hurdus was the Melech, there were Rishoim that were Malachim, but the Rambam says, no, you have to understand that they didn't just win a battle, they brought back the Malchus to Klal Yisrael. The Rambam is stressing that. Till now, the Yavan had Melucha over Klal Yisrael in the second base of Mikdash, and they brought the Melucha back to Klal Yisrael. Very, very important for the Rambam to say. So that is Halacha Aleph, that there was a Mulchama, and the Rebbeinu Shalom saved Klal Yisrael from Yavan. Halacha Beis, Zak the Rambam, he continues, when Klal Yisrael were Geiver and they destroyed them, it was the 25th day of Kislev, and they went into the Heichal, they didn't find Shem and Tahar, they only found one Pach, and it was only enough to be Madlik one day. The Rambam says clearly it was enough to be Madlik for one day. This is Shaila had to be Geiris, but the Rambam says clearly only be Madlik one day. They were Madlik the Maracha, and it burned for 8 days. So Rambam says two different Rambams. Okay, two seemingly independent Nisim that took place. First, the Chazoyas HaMelucha to Klal Yisrael. We're going to get back to this, Be'ez Hashem. Why is this so important? Why is this so fundamental? L'chaya, it was Tzdukim, it was Yanai, it was Hurdus. It was not the greatest situation. Mamish, almost immediately after. A little bit it lasted, but for sure for the Rambam to say it lasted 200 years, very, very, a little bit shver. And so he's saying it's a fundamental Yeshua from a Mulchama perspective. And then he says there's another thing, seemingly independent, that there was some random nace about burning for 8 days. The two things have no shaykhis, mamish no shaykhis to each other. L'chayra no shaykhis. We'll see. We'll have different diyukim. If there is a shaykhis, no shaykhis. But the Rambam Pashtas, l'chayra, there's no shaykhis to each other. And then the Rambam Halacha Gimel says, u'mipnei zeh, because of this. Because of what? He doesn't say. He said there was a Mulchama, that's Halacha Aleph. Halacha Beis is the nace of the Shmoyne Yom. Again, the Rambam splits it into two halachas, meaning he's lahedya dividing the two nisim. And he says, Mepnei zeh, Chazal or Mesakin, Sheyushmoyna Sayamim Ha'elu, these 8 days, which is Pashtas, the 8 days of the nace, which begin on the 25th day of Kislev, they should be Yemei Simcha v'Halel, and your Madlikim Neiris Be'erev on the Pischei Habatim every single night, Laharois Ulegalois Hanes. Which nace? He doesn't say. Laharois Ulegalois Hanes, and these days are called Yemei Chanukah, and he ends off, it's a mitzvah derabanan to light the neiris, like Kriyas HaMegillah. Also strange lashon. You have to compare other, it's a mitzvah derabanan to light neiris Chanukah. You have to say like Kriyas HaMegillah. Why is that relevant? But the Rambam seems to say, leaving us in the cold. What is this what exactly is the nace that we're representing with the menorah? And what's the yesod? Like which nace is important? Which nace do we have to keep in mind? And we're just going to skip the Rambam all the way at the end. Says another interesting lashon. Mitzvahs halacha yad beis, mamish right before the end of Hilchos Chanukah. He says mitzvahs ner Chanukah mitzvah chavivi hiyad moed. It's very chaviv. He says a person has to be nizar in the mitzvah lohidia hanes, to let the nace be known. Again, he doesn't say which nace. And then he adds ulohoisif b'shvach hakel v'hoidaya loy ala nisim sha'asalanu, to add with the shvach and the hoidaya on the nisim that he did. So what are you adding? There's a nace, and then you have to add what are these two things? What exactly are the nisim over here? The nace and then the nisim. What are we talking about? A little bit of a shver ramba. So if you pay attention to what we're doing, we basically do Chanukah. Basically consists, besides the mitzvah deraisa to have mesibis, besides for that mitzvah, Chanukah. That was a joke. So Chanukah basically consists of 3 parts. There's al nisim, there's the hadlokas haneris, and then there is Halal. Three parts of Chanukah. And the Rashi Gada in Masechah Shabbos explains there's a lashon of Halal v'hoidah, lahoidais ulahalal. Rashi says it's very meduktik. Halal means Halal, and hoidah means alanisim. So Rashi says, and it's meduktik because alanisim you say in moedim. It's hoidah. Hoidais and Halal are not just random words. There's a concept of hoidah and there's a concept of Halal. Alanisim is Haidah, and Halal is Halal. And the Neiris also, but the Lahoidais Ula Halal. If you look at the Alanisim, we don't mention any we don't mention at all the nace of the Pach Shemen. It's not mentioned. It's thrown in derech agav. It's definitely not emphasized. And the way the Rambam, it's interesting because the Rambam doesn't mention in Hilchos Chanukah. The Rambam does not mention that you have to say Al Anisim. So apparently the Rambam understood that the chiyuv to say Al Anisim is not part of the Haidah of Chanukah, which we'll have to explain. But there's a concept of Haidah, which let's go with Rashi for a second. Haidah means to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Haidah is Al Hanisim. That's and if you look at Al Hanisim, it seems to be focused mainly on the Milchama versus the nace of the Pach Shemen, as opposed to the Hadlakas Haneris. Even though we do mention in the Haneris Alala is not made up; it's brought down in the Mesechah Seifrim. It really has a takana. They bring it down in the beginning of the Hagayis Maimonides brings it down. A little bit of a different nusach than we have, but Al Hanisim is something that's brought down. It's not we just made it up. It's not just brought down in the Siddur, and the Ma'is Tzur also. The focus is mainly on the Hadlakas Haneris. In the Al Hanisim, in the Haneris Alalu itself, we do throw in the Al Hanisim on Al Mulchamis. We do throw in the Mulchamis also. But in the Ma'is Tzur for sure, we mention mainly, again, we don't talk about the Mulchama, we mention mainly the burning of the 8 days. And L'chaya Tzapala, why is it so confusing? Why can't it just be clear cut? Yitzias Mitzrayim, we know what the nace is. It comes to Chanukah, it's very confusing. Is the nace the Mulchama? Is the nace the Neiris? Is it both? One you say this, one you say that. What's the Yesod? So in Rashi's Shita, it's simple. Rashi says it's Haidah. The thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom for the Ches Neiris, there's no reason to be Maida. It's not. Haidah is on a taiva that the Rebbeinu Shalom did for you. It's a wonderful thing that it burned for 8 days, and maybe it's beautiful, it's nice. But l'chayr, that wouldn't be mechayev necessarily a Haidah, that we have to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for that. A Mulchama, the Rebbeinu Shalom saved us from the Yevanim, that would be mechayev a Haidah. So that would be very geshmak. While in Al Nisim, we don't say anything about the Neiris, because no Haidah on l'chayr. There's not necessarily a Chiyav Haidah on the Neiris, the Chiyav Haidah would be on the Mulchama. So when you're thanking for the Mulchama, you mention in Al Nisim the Mulchamas. That's the Haidah. But the Neiris is l'chayr independent. It was a beautiful thing, and we're very happy that we had it, but not necessarily as the Chiyav Haidah, perhaps. And as opposed, perhaps. Now let's take it back to the Neiris for a minute. L'chayr, the Neiris can't be on the Mulchama, because what does the Neiris have to do with the Mulchama? If the Neiris would be a time that we thank the Ben Shalom for Haidah, why would we light Neiris? Maybe we should drink wine. I don't know. What's up with Neiris? Well, on Pesach we drink 4 cups of wine. So maybe Chanukah we should drink 8 cups of whatever you want. Why is there a chiyuv to light Neiris for the Mulchama? It's mamish a basic question. A mamish aleph based question. What does the Neiris have to do with the Mulchama? Why in the Bishlama if the Neiris is to celebrate the 8 days, the burning the 8 days? So it makes sense. You're lighting Neiris because that was the nace that they had Neiris. We have Neiris. It makes sense. But l'chayr for the Mulchama, the Neiris mamish has no shayches. So why in the world would the hadlakas haneiris be for the Mulchama? So if that's true, l'chayr has no shayches to the Mulchama. So then it's very geshmak. Al Hanisim, separate mamish, independent. It gets confusing, but it's independent. Al Hanisim is Haidah. That's specifically for the Mulchama. We're thanking the Moshe for the Mulchama. The Neiris has nothing to do with the Mulchama. We throw in Al Mulchamis, but it really has nothing to do with the Mulchama. It's just Haidah, the Rebbeinu Shalom. Halal, not really Haidah. Halal for the Rebbeinu Shalom. We're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu for making such a wonderful nace of 8 days of Neiris, a beautiful nace. What exactly the Maila is Yesh La'ayin, but Al Kaponim, it's something we were able to use Shem and Tahara. We didn't have to use Shem and Tameh. A beautiful thing. So and that would be Umamish be totally independent. There are 2 simultaneous things going on in Yom Tov, like we have on Sukkot. We have a Lulav, we have Sukkot, 2 separate mitzvahs, no shayches to each other. So we have Haidah for the Mulchama, and we have Halal for the nace of the Neiris. Beautiful, independent. They have no shayches to each other. Huh? I'm talking about. I didn't mention Halal. I'm talking about the Neiris. The Neiris. The Neiris is independent, and it seems to be like that. The problem is by the Neiris we throw in Mulchamas also, and the other problem is if Al Hanisim is only for the Mulchama, which it happens to be only for the Mulchama, then why do we say Al Hanisim 8 days? The Mulchama was only 1 day. So we should have 1 day, Al Hanisim, and finished. If we're thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom for just the Nisim of winning the battle, that L'chayr should be 1 day, that should not be for 8 days. Everybody say, I'm not asking Grace HaChadushim, this is Aleph Beis. This is Mamish, if you think a little bit about the Yom Tov, this should Mamish be Aleph Beis. Which mitzvah? What's simcha? Ask the average guy. Everyone? It's confusing. What are we doing? Are we celebrating the neighbors? Celebrating the Muhammad? Celebrating both? It's a basic question. So Alamai, we're celebrating both. So why do we only mention one here and one there? And if that's true, so why l'chayra the Alanisim should only be one day? If it's Alanisim Zichar doesn't mention anything about the neighbors. L'chayra the Muhammad was only one day. L'chayra, why would we mention it all 8 days? It should be totally independent. If it is independent, it should be totally independent. Like you see by Sukkot, right? The Chiyuv of Sukkah is 7 days. The Chiyuv of Lulav is only 1 day Midiraisa. We have Midirabanan, we do it 7 days. But Midiraisa, it's only one. 2 separate mitzvahs. One's a mitzvah deraisa 1 day. One's a mitzvah deraisa 7 days. So Chanukah should be the same thing. Mitzvah derabanan to say Al Anisim for the Muhammad, and then you light the neighbors. For the neighbors, 2 separate things that took place. Chaim asked a basic question. So apparently, we have to say that it's a mistake. And apparently, the 2 nisim are intertwined. Why, we'll see in a second, which is why we can still stick with the fact that Al Anisim mentions mainly the Milchama, because that's Haidah. Haidah has to be for something that we benefited. A menorah burning for 8 days is wonderful, but you can't necessarily have Haidah on that. Haidah is a taiva that the Rebbe did for me. It's why I could have lit the Achronim asked. We could have lit menorah b'tumah. It wasn't a wonderful. It wasn't. Maybe it's not lachatchila, but we could have done it. I don't know if that's mechayev Haidah. A Milchama is mechayev Haidah, but the neiris is mainly for the hadlakas haneris. And what's the connection between the two? So I think the connection is like this. We mentioned Medayik in the beginning that the Rambam says that Klal Yisrael won over the Milchama over the Chashminah, or the Chashminah won over the Milchama, and they took back the Malchus to Klal Yisrael for 200 years. And we said it wasn't really the high point of Klal Yisrael, but Lamaisa, the Malchus remained by Klal Yisrael. What's the Nekuda? First of all, why did the Yavanim have such a Mayradika Taina on the Menorah? What was unique about the Menorah? What did they have in the Menorah? What was the Nekuda with the Menorah? Chazal say, Chazal dash in the pasuk, the beginning of Parshas Bereishis, the Choshech al Panei Sahaim, Choshech is Yavan. Yavan is called Choshech, which means obviously they are opposite to Oyer. The Oyer is the Menorah. The Yavan represents Choshech. What's the Nekuda of the Choshech of Yavan and the Oyer of the Menorah that Yavan was looking out to destroy? What exactly were they arguing against? So if you're Medayik and the Rambam is saying clearly that they had a shlita over the Mahalach HaChayim of Klal Yisrael. They had a shlita over the attitude of Klal Yisrael. It wasn't so much, they were mevatel the das, but the main nekuda was not the specific mitzvahs that they attacked. It was more the identity of Klal Yisrael. Yavan wanted to destroy the identity of being a Yid. The Bach explains that the reason why they were able to come is because Klal Yisrael were nisrashlu ba'avodah. They didn't have a proper passion for avodas Hashem. They did the mitzvahs, but it was without the umph, without the passion, and therefore the punishment was that Yavan came in. What Yavan was trying to do was to uproot the attitude, the das, like they used in Nusach, of Klal Yisrael. They were shaylit in the Mammon, they were shaylit bibnei Sehem, they were partsu pirtzas in the Heichal. The tachlis was to be mitame Klal Yisrael, to ruin the Mahalach HaChayim of Klal Yisrael. Now, why is that specifically the Menorah? So the reason why the Menorah is unique, the Menorah is a very unique Kelu, it's very unique over the other Kelim, is that there's really different aspects to it, but in a halachic aspect, a Menorah that's not lit is felt in the cheftza of a Menorah. When the Menorah is lit, that gives it a Menorah, it gives off light. A mizbeach is a mizbeach. A mizbeach is something that you burn on. You bring a carbon on. You bring ketayers on. Depending which the Aron didn't really have an avodah. But the shulchan, you put lachem on. It's a shulchan. A menorah is something that gives light. When you light the menorah, you're finishing. You're putting the finishing touches on the menorah. A lit menorah is a menorah. A menorah that's not lit is not. It's a menorah. It has the ability to light, but it's missing in the chefts of the menorah. There's a nekuda here. The menorah represents the chayim, so to speak. Chazal say that the menorah and the aron both represent the Torah. The aron represents Keser Torah, and the menorah also represents the oyer of Torah. What's the difference between Keser Torah and the oyer of Torah? So the Sfarim say that the Keser Torah is Torah Shebiksav, and the menorah represents Torah Shebal Peh, which it's meduyik that the Yevanim tried to attack Torah Shebal Peh. What's the Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebal Peh? Torah Shebal Peh is part of Klal Yisrael. Torah Shebiksav is Munach, where it is. We see like the Tzdukim didn't believe in Torah Shebal Peh, which was connected to the Nes of Chanukah. The Tzdukim didn't believe in Torah Shebal Peh. Torah Shebal Peh actually began in the beginning of the Nes of Chanukah. That was the beginning of Torah Shebal Peh. The beginning of Torah Shebal Peh was, it was earlier, but the Tanoim mainly began at the time of the Nes of Chanukah. Yosef ben Yezer Ish Tzreida, Yosef ben Yechon Ish Yerushalayim were the earlier of the Zugis. That was Be'erach the same time that the Yevanim came. It was the time of the proliferation of Torah Shebal Peh. Torah Shebal Peh always existed. But the main Torah Shebal Peh, the way we have it, starts with Shimon HaTzadik, if it could be he was considered a Tana, and Tignes Ish Seichai. And right in the beginning of Maseches Avos, when it discusses the dynasty of Torah Shebal Peh, the beginning of Torah Shebal Peh is precisely Be'erach, almost Kemat, at the time of Chanukah. And the Nekuda is, Ram doesn't bring it here, but he brings it in a different place. The Nekuda is that at the time of Neris, the attack that the Yevanim had was specifically on this concept of Torah Shebal Peh. Torah Shebal Peh is the Mahalach of Torah of Klal Yisrael, is the Kihem Chayenu of Torah of Klal Yisrael. Torah Shebiksav is Torah Shebiksav. Personal is Torah Shebiksav. Torah Shebal Peh, like the Medrash Nochum says in Parashas Noach, is a Mahalach HaChayim. There's a concept of Amelus in Torah Shebal Peh. There's a concept of internalizing Torah Shebal Peh. The Svarim explain that a person becomes the klaf of Torah Shebal Peh. They say for Torah, the klaf is there. An individual becomes the klaf of Torah Shebal Peh. The fight of the Yevanim was this Nekuda. It wasn't to kill Klal Yisrael. It was to destroy the identity, to destroy the connection to Torah Shebal Peh, to destroy the concept that this is ours, this becomes part of us. This is our Mahalach HaChayim. It's not just a religion. It's not just activity that we do. It identifies us. We are identified as individuals that are connected to Torah Shebal Peh. And the reason why it's so important to remember is because Chanukah is really the end. That's really what the Rambam is bringing in. Chanukah is the end of the Nisim. The last Nes that Klal Yisrael experienced was Chanukah, right? Chronologically, Purim happened before Chanukah. Chanukah was really the last Nes that we experienced. And if you think about it, it was the first, the main, we're in the Beis HaMikdash, but there was no Nevuah. So that means there was no direct connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom. The only connection they had was to the Chachamim, was through the Torah Shebal Peh, was through Shimon HaTzadik, Yosef ben Yezer, and Tignes Ish Seichai. The earlier Tanaim, they were the ones that set the tone for Klal Yisrael. And when you have such a situation, there's a big sakana. Yevanim cannot fight against a Navi. Eliyahu Navi comes and brings a Nevuah from Klal Yisrael, makes an ace. Yevanim don't get off the ground. There's no meduber. You have Nevuah and you have Chochma Yevanis. There's no conversation b'chlal. It's when Nevuah is gone and Torah Shebal Peh begins, which is what was introduced in Bayis Sheni in the beginning. At that time, towards the middle of Bayis Sheni, when Nevuah was finished, after Mordechai, after Chagas, Chaim Malachi, when Iftar, so there's no more Nevuah by Klal Yisrael. Now we're living off Torah Shebal Peh. We're living off Chochma Sachachamim. We're living off Torah Shebal Peh. That's our existence. And Chochmas Yevanis was a direct threat to that. You could still have Chochma, you could still have Moyer Dikazachin in your life, but it doesn't have to be that Ki'ilu, your identity, identifies as a Yid. You could be a guy, you could act like a guy, you could be a Misyavin, and maybe you'll keep the mitzvahs, some mitzvahs, some mitzvahs. The point wasn't the mitzvahs. The point was the identity. When Klal Yisrael won over the Yevanim, the Rambam makes a stress that they brought back the Melucha to Klal Yisrael, even though they were Rishayim. But the identity came back. There was a concept of a Yid. There was a concept of Malchus by Klal Yisrael. That was the Milchama. The Yevanim were fighting against identity. The point wasn't the physical Milchama. You see in Al Nisim, we say Rishon Giborim Biyad Chalashim makes sense. Ram Biyad Ma'ata makes sense. Then we start talking about Tmeim Biyad Tahir, Rishon Biyad Tzadikim. There's no nace in that, and it's true. There's not really a nace. But the point is that was the fight. The fight was for the identity of Klal Yisrael. When Klal Yisrael won, it was Rishon Biyad Tzadikim. It was Zaydim Biyad Eskeser Secha. Klal Yisrael got their identity back. They got Malchus, like the Rambam stresses. Ve'emidu Melech min HaKoyanim ve'chazor Malchus li Yisrael. The Malchus, we got back our identity. Memela, what was the demonstration of our identity? If we would light the menorah with Shem and Tameh, we'd be Yetzeh. But we'd be missing the whole point. You're right, we have no choice. If we have no choice, we have no choice. But since it was a Milchama for the identity of Klal Yisrael, if they would have been forced to light a Tamei Dika Menorah with Tamei Dika Shemen, they won. The Yevanim are out. But the Yevanim still infiltrated. They still got what they wanted. They still were able to be paigim the Menorah, even if it was only for 7 days, because one day they had. Even if it was only for 7 days. But the bottom line is, they still were matzliach. The gemar of the Nochum was that the Rebbeinu Shalom made the nace that they were able to light from Shemen Tahar. Now the Nochum was finished. Now the gemar of the Nochum was over. It wasn't just that they won the Yevanim and they killed the Yevanim. That's Haidah, and we're mechuyev to say that. But the Yemei Simcha the Hallel, the gemar of that was when the Menorah was able to burn the Tahara, and they didn't have to come on to Shem and Tameh. They didn't have to do things that the Yevanim were trying to do. The Yevanim were lahed, you're trying to be Tameh the Menorah, to stir the identity of Klal Yisrael. Therefore, Chazal were Mesaket Adlokas Aneris. Why? Because the Menorah doesn't just represent the nace of the 8 days. The Menorah represents the kiyum of the Mahalach of Klal Yisrael. The Ramban writes, in the beginning of Parshas Baloischa, famous Ramban, Machlekes Rashi and the Ramban, where the Ramban says in the beginning of Parshas Baloischa, that the Menorah that we light today, is a hemshich of the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. That's what he says. The Menorah that we light today is a hemshich of the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. There is no other Avodah that was in the Beis HaMikdash that we have today. No other Avodah. Every other Avodah we do Zecher, we say Karbanis as a Zecher, we say Ketairis, some of us, as a Zecher. But when you light the Menorah, the Ramban says, your mamish light, it's Ki'ilu, a hemshich of the Menorah. Why does it have to be? Why does the Menorah have to be continuing into Klal Yisrael forever? Because that's what the Menorah represents. The Menorah represents the continuity of the Hatzlacha of the Mahalach HaChayim of Klal Yisrael. And if you want to know something interesting, what's the Mekar for the Milchama against the Yevanim? Chayshech al Panei Sahim. Chazal Darshan, Chayshech is Yavan, Tahim is Edom, which basically means that even today, the Chayshech of Yavan still exists. Chayshech al Panei Sahim, which means as long as the Tahim is here, as long as Edom is around, this threat of Yavan is still here. The Chayshech, the threat of pulling away the identity of Klal Yisrael, a person being a Yid, living with Kedusha V'Tara, was threatened by Yavan, and it's still threatened today. Chayshech al Panei Sahim. We had a Milchama, and we won. But it wasn't a complete Nitzachim, because even at Hayom, that little bit of Chayshech is still left. Chayshech al Panei Sahim. It still exists. And every year when we light the Menorah, we're again battling, so to speak, that Chayshech. We're lighting, so to speak, a Hemshech of the same Menorah, Zakir Ramban, and we're battling the Chayshech of Yavan. The Mela, the Alanisim, and Be'etzem the Neiris, it's intertwined. The reason why it's not mentioned which one it is, because Be'etzem, they're both one ace. It's all a hemshich. One is a hemshich of the other. And therefore, Zakir Rambam like this. The Rambam ends off, and he says, Mitzvahs Ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad moed. Why is it such a chavivas? Why is the chavivas of Ner Chanukah? Because Ner Chanukah represents Klal Yisrael as Klal Yisrael, meaning what we accomplished as ourselves, as our identity. That's the chavivas. Every nace, in a nace, Klal Yisrael was saved from being killed, Mayadik. But here we have a situation that Klal Yisrael was zeicha to regain our identity. And every year, when we light Zakir Ramban, we're doing the same thing that they did. We're lighting for 8 days, and it carried the oyer of the Menorah is meir in the Chayshech. Even today, there is an element of Chayshech of Yavam left. When a person lights the Menorah, and he thinks in his mind that he's lighting up the oyer, and he's demonstrating the Mahalach HaChayim of Klal Yisrael versus the Mahalach of Chayshech of the Goy, versus the Mahalach of Chayshech of the Yevanim, he is fulfilling the same thing that they fulfilled then. Zakter Rambam, v'tzarech adam lizar bo kadei leidia nes. A person has to remind us of the nes. That's the nes of the Neiris Shemen. And then ulahaiseh b'shvach hakel v'idal anisim shasaladu. We also add, we talk about the Muhammad's too, because the Hadlakas HaNeiris doesn't just talk about the Neiris. That's what we mentioned, and Al-Anisim mentioned the Muhammad's too. It's both. The Hadlakas HaNeiris could include both. So basically, really, there were two seemingly independent Nisim that happened in the Nes of Chanukah. One was a Nes of Nochum, one was a Nes of Menorah. But if we understand that the Menorah was an ice sphere of the Nochum, so it's not it's two separate Nisim, which is why in Al Nisim we only talk about the Nes of the Nochum, because that was really the main Nes that we could relate to. The Nochum was an ice sphere, but the main Nes from a Haidah perspective was for the Nochum. We won the Nochum. But Lamaisa, there was, from a Hallel, perspective, you may simcha the halal. The concept of being mahalal the Rebbeinu Shalom incorporates both nisim in it, and the Rambam understands that when a person lights the menorah, that should be what he has in mind, that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us back our identity as being a Yid to appreciate our Kihem Chayenu, living with Torah, not just learning Torah, not just fulfilling mitzvahs, but living it, Kihem Chayenu b'tahara, what the Yevanim wanted to uproot. Memela, Dr. Rambam, a person is being madlik, you madlik the neris, the lahares or lagalas anes, Dr. Rambam, it's like Kriyas HaMegillah. Just like Kriyas HaMegillah announces the story that happened, Hadlokas Haneris is supposed to announce the same way the Persumei Nisa of Hadlokas Haneris is supposed to do the same thing when a person, Zakta Chedush Harim, even if a person is in Chayshech, even if a person is in the depths, the Kayach of the Hadlokas Haneris is the same Nekuda, it's the same Hadloka, Zakta Ramban, as we lit then, and the Hadloka today is a Hadloka of being mayor through the Chayshech. Every person has his Chayshech, every person has his part that's not clear, that he's confused, that he doesn't understand. Concepts in Amunah, concepts in Torah, concepts in mitzvahs, concepts in priorities in life, chinuch, many things people are struggling with. The oyer of the menorah has in it a koyach when a person is utilizing, you may simcha the halal, and itaka is mahalal, the Rebbeinu Shalom that we were zeicha to maintain kedusha entire when he lights the menorah. The Rekeach writes that there are 36 neiros that we light on Chanukah, make the cheshbon 36. He says that the cheshbon of the 36 corresponds to the amount of hours that the Oyer Hagonas was mishamish in the world. We know the Oyer Hagonas was hidden, but the Rekeach says, the Rishon, he says a big chiddush. He says when the day Adam Rishon was created, which was on Friday, the Rebbeinu Shalom reintroduced the Oyer Hagonas. Friday morning, the Oyer Hagonas was opened up again, and it was open all the way through Shabbos. So it was Friday morning, 12 hours, and 24 hours on Shabbos. It was 36 hours, the Rekeach says. Kech writes that the Oyer Hagonas was nishtamish, then the Rebbeinu Shalom hit it. Motzei Shabbos, Rebbeinu Shalom hit it. Zok the Rekeach, when a person lights the Neiros Chanukah, the Oyer Hagonas is in it. L'oisam bilvad, a person can see the clarity, the Oyer of the Oyer Hagonas. It's an opportunity to appreciate and understand that we have a Mahalach HaChayim, we have a Kihem Chayenu, we have a way that we live, and Yavin was trying to uproot our Mahalach HaChayim, and when we light the menorah, we drive Ma'at Oyer, Doiche Harbe Chayshech, we light the menorah, we drive away the Chayshech of Yavan, we drive away all these Chayshechs that exist in the world. We should Be'ezer Hashem be Zeicha to get a little bit of a taste, to enjoy a Hadlak. Don't just run in from work and light it. Appreciate what you're doing. Stop for a minute, think about it, make a tans, do something, make it into a matziv, make it into a lahares or lagalis hanes. It's a mitzvah chaviva. We should have a chavivas for it. And Be'ezer Hashem, when we fulfill the mitzvah of Adlokas Neiros properly, the Rebbeinu Shalom will be meir or chodosh al tziyah Toyer, will be zeichet to the emes ha'or, v'nizkeh chulanu meheira la'oirei Be'ezer Hashem, b'mheira v'yameinu amen.